Hello and welcome to the first of the videos on the Kit Derrick YouTube channel. Today I thought I'd just give you a little bit of information about the background to one of my books, to the Raven Sound. I'm going to be showing you around some of the locations in Liverpool where the book is set later on in a future video. But first of all, I thought I'd talk a little about the inspiration for the book in the first place. The title, a lot of my books, I should say, have puns, double meanings, and further elements you can follow up on, and the Raven Sound is no different. If I show you a copy here of the cover, it's actually a play on the Mersey Sound, the poetry magazine that was brought out in the 1960s, including Roger McGough, Adrian Henry and Brian Patton. And it's also a little play on that because the setting is in the 60s and those people are actually mentioned. But one of the first inspirations for this book was actually the movie and graphic novel The Crow, which is one of my favourites and which I've watched many, many times. But the idea of a spirit appearing to somebody who may or may not be otherworldly kind of inspired me to start writing. One of the other inspirations for the Raven Sound was my friend, the poet Sean Bonney, who passed away shortly before I began writing. And he appears in spirit form in a few of the scenes based on the look that I knew him for in the 1990s. If you know or knew Sean, then you may be able to spot him within the book. But with those two things in mind, I decided to start writing by coming up with a character and just seeing where initially the plot led me. So I started off in a pub, which is always the best place to start anything, in the Caledonia pub, which I'll show some photos of later on, with my main character being sat there. There's one element that I didn't actually mean to include initially, but came up as part of my research, which was while I was looking through images of the 1960s and 1950s, looking for the correct stuff to reference within the book, I came across a particular picture of Marilyn Monroe, which went on to become a central feature of the book, hanging in the back wall of the Caledonia pub. So here's a picture. I own no rights for this picture, but this is what I imagined to be hanging on the rear wall of the Caledonia pub, because I just found it fascinating, the expression on Marilyn's face, and knowing a little about her backstory and unhappy life. It fitted quite well with my unhappy main protagonist. Talking of the protagonist, Jack is not a likeable person. He's not a nice character. I quite often find it difficult to write completely sympathetic main characters. But Jack is possibly one of the worst. He's rude, he's a drunk, he's immoral, he's amoral, he's lost his way entirely and lost his faith in humanity, which is one of the things that the two spirits who appear to him are there to remind him of, about the road less travelled and the paths not taken within his life, and also the realisation that his best friend back when he was young is probably the closest relationship he's ever had, and I think personally that Jack was in love with Brian, but they certainly had a very strong brotherly friendship which outweighed anything else in their lives at the time. And when he goes back, I think he starts to realise that he's never been a particularly nice person, but Brian was there for him and was part of the community. Community is a very big theme in the Raven Sound. One of the things about the L8 area, I suppose in all of the periods of the books, is that it's a very welcoming and mixed community area with a very strong bond for the residents. I know its reputation is otherwise because of the media and because of the riots in the 1980s, but it's always been an area, certainly in the 20th century, where different cultures have mixed together, mainly in peace and happiness, against the establishment, perhaps bonding together in a way that you don't see in other areas of Liverpool, or didn't see in other areas of Liverpool. And that's an important theme within the Raven Sound. There's a club on Harbin Street in Liverpool, which is now the Hot Water Laughter Club. Back in the 1990s, it was Magnet, which was a downstairs bar, and in the 1960s, it was known as the Rumbling Tum, It was quite unique in the area because it was outside of Toxteth, but it welcomed a mixed clientele of races in the way that most of the town centre bars didn't. The communities from L8 tended to stay within their own community areas up to Parliament Street, and there were a number of dance halls and clubs on there where particularly black musicians would perform. But within the town itself, it tended to be, as with many other places in the country, with most other places in the country, quite a prejudiced and divided community. The Rumbling Tongue was one of the few places where people mixed together, and that's one of the reasons I picked it as the central location for the insights that Jack discovers towards the end of the book. One feature I did struggle with in terms of writing the book is the language. There's a lot of offensive language and terminology in the book, whether it's racial, religious, misogynistic. But on balance, I didn't feel it would be right to try and recreate the 90s and the 60s and the present day, I suppose, without acknowledging those opinions and views and problems that we have in society. And I don't think you can truly do that without using the terminology which would have been used at the time. So that's why I put an author note at the end of the book to explain my choice, and that I had struggled over the inclusion of some words and some insults in there, but decided on balance that they needed to be there to balance with the views of Jack and the I suppose the insights that Jack comes to about his own frame of mind and his own prejudices. Yeah.